Salam, peace be upon you. Recap of our journey, parts 1 to 6. Pattern is primary. Phi is circular comparability. Only relations delta phi are public. All material assumptions must be declared, anti-smuggling. Every claim must declare its type. Pattern, claim, certificate, artifact are four distinct identities. Every claim comes through a declared window of finite access. Part 7. The first readable phase of phi pattern difference. The moment we ask, what do we actually see first? Let us take stock of where we stand. We have built a foundation of remarkable depth and clarity. We established that pattern is primary, not decoration on reality, but the structure through which reality becomes publicly identifiable. We named the primitive, phi, the root permission for distinction itself. Not a thing, but the possibility that this could differ from that. We gave phi its essential shape, a circle. No privilege zero, no absolute origin, only relations matter. We drew the consequence. Because phi is circular, absolute values are not public. Only relations, differences, rates, loop residues can be shared and certified. We faced the central threat, smuggling, hidden assumptions that corrupt pattern knowledge. We installed the anti-smuggling principle. All material assumptions must be declared. We recognized that not all claims are the same. We installed type discipline. Every claim must declare its type. We confronted identity collapse and installed the fourfold identity. Pattern, claim, certificate, and artifact are distinct and must be tracked separately. We then face the truth of finite access. Every claim comes through a declared window, a specific region, duration, resolution, and set of conditions. No claim comes from nowhere. Now we are inside a window. We have declared where we are looking, for how long, at what resolution, under what conditions. The question becomes, what do we see first? What is the most primitive, most basic, most immediate thing we can read from a phi pattern through our window? The answer is simple, profound, and easy to miss. We see difference. Not absolute values, not the pattern in its entirety, not meaning, not interpretation. Difference, variation, contrast. The fact that here is not the same as there, that now is not the same as then, that this is not the same as that. Difference is the first readable phase of phi pattern. It is the seed from which all higher pattern knowledge grows. A simple everyday example, the blank page and the mark. Imagine a completely blank piece of white paper. What do you see? You see nothing. Or rather, you see a uniform field of white. No variation, no contrast, no difference. Now imagine someone makes a single small black dot in the center of the page. What do you see now? You see the dot, but more fundamentally, you see difference. The difference between the dot and the surrounding white, between marked and unmarked, between here and there. That difference is the first thing your visual system detects. Before you identify the dot as a dot, before you interpret it as a mark, before you think about what it might mean, your visual system registers contrast. This is what part 7 is about. The most primitive readable content is not what phi is absolutely at any point. It is how phi differs between points. Before we can read pattern structure, we must read difference. What difference is and is not. Let us be precise about what we mean by difference in phi pattern science. Difference is not absolute value. It is not phi equals 2.7. It is phi at point A minus phi at point B. Difference is not meaning. It is not, this difference means something is changing. It is just the fact of variation itself. Difference is not interpretation. It is not, this difference indicates a trend. It is the raw material from which interpretations may later be built. Difference is structured contrast. It is not just not the same. It is measurable, comparable, trackable. It can be large or small, positive or negative, depending on direction of comparison, consistent or varying. Difference is the first public fact. Because differences survive global shifts, phi, the phi plus c. They are invariant under relabeling. They are what we can share across different coordinate choices. In mathematical shorthand, difference is written as delta phi, the change in phi from one point to another. But in plain language, difference is just here versus there, now versus then, this versus that. Difference as primitive readability. Why is difference the first thing we read? Because before we can detect pattern, we must detect detectable change itself. Something must vary. Something must contrast. Something must be different from its background. Consider a photograph that is perfectly uniform, all pixels exactly the same color. What pattern does it show? None. It shows nothing because it shows no difference. Consider a sound that is perfectly constant, a single pure tone at unchanging volume, unchanging pitch, unchanging everything. What pattern does it show? None. It shows nothing because it shows no difference. Consider a texture that is perfectly repetitive, exactly the same motif repeated infinitely without variation. Does it show pattern? Yes, but the pattern is in the differences between motif and background, between repetition and repetition. Even perfect repetition requires difference. The difference between one instance and the next, between the pattern and the space it occupies. Difference is the precondition of all pattern legibility. No difference, no pattern. Difference is structured, not merely not same. Here is a crucial point that is often missed. Difference is not just the absence of sameness. It is structured contrast that can be measured. How much difference? A little or a lot? Delta phi can be quantified 0.1, 1.5, 2 pi, not just different, but different by this much. Compared. Is the difference between A and B larger or smaller than the difference between C and D? Differences can themselves be compared. Tracked across transformations. Does the difference remain constant as we shift labels? Does it change under other transformations? Difference is not static, it can be followed. Built into higher order claims. From differences, we can construct rates of change, how difference varies across space, patterns of variation, where differences are large or small, and eventually the entire edifice of geometry, dynamics, and topology. Difference is not trivial, it is the seed of everything. A deeper example, the seashore. Walk along a beach at low tide. What do you see? The sand, the water, the shells, the rocks. But what do you actually detect first? The difference between wet sand and dry sand, a line of contrast marking where the tide has been. The difference between smooth sand and ripple sand, patterns left by waves. The difference between sand and shell, objects standing out against background. The difference between shell and shell, variations in color, shape, size. Before you identify wet sand as a concept, before you think ripple marks as a geological feature, before you name the shells, your visual system is registering differences. Light here, dark there. Smooth here, rough there. Curved here, straight there. The entire beach, in its infinite richness, is made legible through difference. Now, imagine the beach at night, with no moon, no stars, complete darkness. You see nothing, because there is no difference in light intensity reaching your eyes. The beach is still there, but it is not legible. Difference requires the right conditions. This is why part 6 came before part 7. Difference is read through a window under specific conditions. Change the window, change the lighting, change your position, change your visual acuity, and the differences you can read change. Difference as the seed of all further structure. Here is the profound claim of part 7. Difference is not just the first thing we read, it is the seed from which all higher pattern structure grows. From difference to geometry. Consider how we get geometry-like structure from differences. If you measure phi at many points in a region, you get a field of values. The differences between neighboring points tell you how phi varies locally. The pattern of those differences, how they change from place to place, gives you something like curvature, like slope, like local shape. This is the beginning of geometry, not from absolute coordinates, but from relations between neighboring differences. From difference to dynamics. Consider how we get dynamics-like structure from differences. If you measure phi at the same point at different times, the differences tell you how phi changes over time. The pattern of those temporal differences, rates of change, accelerations, rhythms, gives you something like motion, like evolution, like process. This is the beginning of dynamics, not from absolute time, but from relations between successive differences. From difference to topology. Consider how we get topology from differences. If you go around the closed loop, measuring phi at each point, the total accumulated difference around the loop may not be zero. Because phi is circular, you can wind around and return to a different representation of the same point. That loop difference, the winding number, the holonomy, is a global property built entirely from local differences. It cannot be seen at any single point, but it emerges from the pattern of differences around the loop. This is the beginning of topology, not from pre-existing holes, but from how differences behave around closed paths. Everything, geometry, dynamics, topology, grows from difference. Another example, the musical score. Look at a page of sheet music. What do you see first? The notes, but notes are really just markers of difference. A note is different from the staff lines. A higher note is different from a lower note. The vertical position on the staff encodes pitch difference. A longer note is different from a shorter note. The shape encodes duration difference. The entire musical structure, melody, harmony, rhythm, counterpoint, is built from differences. Melody is pattern of pitch differences over time. Harmony is pattern of simultaneous pitch differences. Rhythm is pattern of durational differences. Counterpoint is pattern of interacting melodic differences. Before you hear the music in your mind, before you interpret it as beautiful or sad, before you analyze its structure, you register differences. Higher, lower, longer, shorter, louder, softer. The score is a map of differences, and from those differences, all musical meaning flows. Difference across scales, from quarks to galaxies. Let us see difference at work across every scale of the universe. At the quantum scale, what makes one quantum state different from another? Not absolute values, those are often unmeasurable, but phase differences, energy differences, probability differences. The interference pattern in the double-slit experiment comes from phase differences between paths. The energy levels of an atom are differences from the ground state. Quantum field theory is built on differences from vacuum. Difference is the language of the quantum world. At the atomic scale, what makes one element different from another? The number of protons, but that is a difference count. 6 protons means carbon, 8 means oxygen. The difference of 2 protons changes everything. What makes one isotope different from another? Difference in neutron number. What makes one ionization state different from another? Difference in electron count. The periodic table is a table of differences. At the molecular scale, what makes water different from hydrogen peroxide? H2O versus H2O2, a difference of one oxygen atom. That small difference transforms properties entirely. Molecular structure is all about differences in bonding patterns, in spatial arrangements, in charge distributions. Isomers have the same atoms but different connectivity, pure difference in relation. At the biological scale, what makes one species different from another? Differences in DNA sequences, in morphology, in behavior, in ecological niche. What makes one individual different from another? Differences in genetics, in development, in experience, in environment. Evolution itself is the story of difference, variation, selection, divergence. Without difference, no evolution. At the ecological scale, what makes one ecosystem different from another? Differences in species composition, in climate, in geography, in disturbance regimes. What makes one trophic level different from another? Differences in energy source, in position in food web, in biomass. Ecology is the science of differences in living systems. At the climate scale, what makes one climate different from another? Differences in temperature, precipitation, seasonality, wind patterns. What makes climate change detectable? Differences over time. Warmer summers, wetter winters, more frequent extremes. Climate science is built on measuring differences. At the cosmic scale, what makes one galaxy different from another? Differences in size, shape, color, star formation rate, central black hole activity. What makes the cosmic microwave background meaningful? Tiny temperature differences, 1 part in 100,000 across the sky. Those differences encode the entire history of the universe. Cosmology is the study of cosmic differences. At the social scale, what makes one society different from another? Differences in culture, in institutions, in economic structure, in values. What makes social change detectable? Differences over time, in attitudes, in behaviors, in distributions. Social science is the measurement of social differences. At the personal scale, what makes you different from who you were yesterday? Small differences in knowledge, in mood, in experience. What makes you different from everyone else? The unique pattern of differences that is your life. Personal identity is a pattern of differences. 10. The bridge from primitive comparability to formal readouts. Here is the deepest significance of Part 7. In Part 2, we introduced phi as primitive comparability, the root permission for distinction itself. That was abstract, foundational, pre-pattern. In Part 3, we gave phi its shape, circular, relational, with no absolutes. In Part 4, we established that only relations, differences, are public. In Part 6, we placed ourselves in windows, finite access to pattern. Now, in Part 7, we take the first step from foundation to practice. Difference is the bridge. It is the first manifestation of phi pattern as something publicly legible. It is how the abstract possibility of distinction becomes actual, readable content. It is the translation of this could differ from that into this does differ from that, and by this much. Without difference, phi remains pure possibility. With difference, pattern begins. Every subsequent part, lifts, jets, topology, defects, dynamics, emergence, builds on this single foundation. All pattern knowledge, in all its richness, grows from the humble seed of structured contrast. What difference is not? Anti-smuggling at the first step. Because difference is so fundamental, we must be careful about what we do not smuggle into it. Difference is not absolute value. We do not sneak absolutes back in by treating differences as if they were measured against a universal zero. Differences are always between 2 points, 2 times, 2 states. Difference is not visual only. Difference is not just what I see. It is any detectable variation in sound, in temperature, in chemical concentration, in mathematical value, in anything that can be compared. Difference is not meaning. We do not interpret difference at this stage. A difference does not mean anything yet. It is just a fact. Here is different from there by this much. Meaning comes later in interpretive layers. Difference is not trivial. It is easy to dismiss difference as obvious, as something everyone already knows. But difference, properly understood, is the seed of all pattern knowledge. It deserves respect. Difference is not the whole pattern. Difference is the first readable face, not the entire pattern. There is more to come: global structure, topology, dynamics. But it all starts here. These are the anti-smuggling protections at the first step. They keep difference clean, foundational, ready to build upon. The rigor layer. The relational readability gate. Difference gets its own gate, the relational readability gate. The relational readability gate asks, is the claim based on certifiable difference, delta phi, within the declared window, rather than on absolute values or hidden interpretations? If the answer is no, if the claim depends on absolutes, or if the claim difference cannot be certified, the claim cannot proceed. The relational readability gate also requires that the comparison context is declared. What is being compared to what? The measurement of difference is within the window's resolution and uncertainty. Noise and structure difference are not yet confused. That will come later. This gate ensures that the first step of pattern reading is sound. Firewalls. What difference discipline blocks? Difference discipline installs several firewalls. No absolute value reintroduction. Claims that depend on absolute phi, not differences, are blocked at this gate. No visual bias. Difference is not just visual. Claims that treat difference as only what I see are smuggling a hidden assumption. No premature semantics. Difference does not mean anything yet. Claims that interpret difference at this stage, this difference means X, are smuggling interpretation into foundation. No treating difference as trivial. Claims that dismiss difference as obvious, as not worth declaring, are smuggling the assumption that everyone already knows what difference means. No confusing noise with structure. At this stage, we do not yet distinguish random variation from lawful pattern. That comes later. Claims that pretend to know the difference at this stage are smuggling. These firewalls keep difference clean. What difference gives us? Certification outputs. By the end of part 7, we have installed several certified outputs. Output 1. First readable layer installed. Lawful difference, delta phi, is now the foundation of all pattern legibility. Output 2. Relational readability gate justified. Every claim must pass this gate before proceeding to higher level pattern reading. Output 3. Bridge to differentiation built. We now have the conceptual foundation for reading local change, part 8, local signatures, part 9, and all that follows. Output 4. Understanding that difference is the seed. We now see that geometry, dynamics, topology all grow from difference. Output 5. Anti-smuggling at the first step. We have protected the foundation from common corruptions. These outputs make possible everything that follows. The refusal condition, when a claim cannot be certified. Difference discipline gives us clear refusal conditions. Refuse if difference is treated as absolute quantity without relation. If the claim says delta phi equals 2.7 without declaring what is being compared to what, refuse. Difference is always between. Refuse if contrast is asserted without declared comparison context. This is different is not enough. Different from what? Under what conditions? Through what window? Refuse if the claim pretends to read absolute phi directly. If the claim says phi equals 2.7 without translating into differences, refuse. Absolute values are not public. Refuse if the claim smuggles meaning into difference at this stage. This difference means the pattern is changing. Maybe, but that is interpretation, not pure difference reading. Refuse until interpretation is declared. Refusal here is not punishment, it is protecting the foundation. Why this matters beyond science? Difference in everyday life. Difference is not only for science, it is the basis of all perception, all learning, all growth. In relationships, we often fail to notice differences. We assume our partner is the same as yesterday, the same as us, the same as our expectation. Then conflict arises, because differences were there all along, but we did not see them. The discipline of noticing difference is the beginning of understanding. In learning, we grow by noticing differences. A child learns language by noticing differences in sounds, in meanings, in contexts. A student learns physics by noticing differences in how problems are solved. A master learns by noticing subtle differences beginners miss. In art, we appreciate by noticing differences. The difference between two shades of blue, the difference between two brushstrokes, the difference between this performance and that one. In meditation, we practice noticing difference. The difference between breathing in and breathing out, between thought and thought, between sensation and sensation. Difference is the first readable phase of everything. The handoff. Why lifts come next. We now have difference, the first readable phase of phi pattern. But there is a problem. Phi lives on a circle. Differences are fine, they survive the shift. But to read local change, to say how phi varies from point to point in a smooth way, we need more than just discrete differences. We need something like derivatives, like rates of change. But on a circle, ordinary linear differentiation does not work directly. A value on a circle cannot be linearly compared without choosing a reference, and that choice introduces ambiguity. We need a way to read local change that respects the circular nature of phi. We need lifts, local unwrappings that let us treat the circle as a line temporarily, while remembering that the line is not the truth. This is what comes next. Part 8. How phi pattern becomes differentiable. Lifts, branch cuts, and the first carrier. This has been part 7 of the Phi Pattern Science Foundation. The journey continues with part 8, how phi pattern becomes differentiable. Lifts, branch cuts, and the first carrier.